sky. Don't let it all go passing by. You know you only get one life.
Vision without execution is hallucination. That quote from Thomas Edison aligns so well with today's guest, Andy Smith. He has spent over 2 decades proving that great ideas mean nothing without action. He's built and scaled companies across industries by pairing vision with relentless execution. He's blended old school business fundamentals with new school tools like AI and automation. From a start in nuclear engineering to leading ventures that achieved 8-figure acquisitions, his career is defined by turning complex problems into real growth. So today we're going to dive deep into some of those lessons, philosophies, and innovations that drive his work and the mindset it takes to build something that lasts. Andy, thanks for being here, my friend.
My friend, thank you for that intro. Thank you for having me, and a pleasure to be here for sure.
Awesome. So, Andy, I was a mutual friend of ours I had the pleasure of speaking with. He said, "Hey, you have to connect with Andy Smith." I said, "All right, I'll connect." And I'm telling everybody who's listening and watching, I am so glad I did. So I'll do the plug early. If you're not connected with Andy Smith, get connected. You won't regret it. So, that being said, for anyone who doesn't know you, maybe a little brief intro from you.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you again. That was nice. No, man, I grew up in small town America, over in a little suburb outside of Birmingham, Alabama. My mom was a nurse who worked night shift, and my dad was an electrician. So very blue collar, very small town, very, um, going to college was a big deal. Going to be an engineer in college meant stability for your career, right? And so pursued engineering, and then realized, well, once you graduate, you need to go do engineering things.
Mm,
So worked at a nuclear power plant for as my first job out of college, which was my goal there was to say, hey, how do I go learn what all this stuff you learn about in school really is? What is a pipe? What is a valve? What does it mean to say maintenance and all these things? And so did that, transitioned into a sales engineering role for a Belgium company, moved
mm,
up to Atlanta. And that was cool because it was a small little entrepreneurial group launching products, and we were attempting to take them to market. So that meant all the things that you do as an entrepreneur, right? Do I have product market fit? How do I price it? Where do I go? Who's my customer? All those things. So it was a little bit of an entrepreneurial training ground, and then jumped into entrepreneurship in 2007 when I started and co-founded my first business. And then ever since, brother, been living the wild jungle ride of entrepreneurship.
Man, I get intimidated already, man. You mentioned you started in nuclear power, and I'm sitting here going, man, when I hear the words nuclear power, I go, man, that's a little bit beyond probably my intelligence level, but that's okay. Let me start there though. Since you started in nuclear power, how did that experience shape the way you approach building businesses today?
So just a funny thing on that, I had two job offers coming out of college. One was U.S. Steel in Birmingham, Alabama,
Mm,
and they said, "Hey, if you take this job, your fingernails are going to always be black and dirty." And I was like, "Oh, a little bit intimidated."
mm,
Nuclear power was a complete opposite. So that was you come in, and I remember walking around with my supervisor, and I took 2 steps walking up a set of stairs. Instead of one, I took two just to be faster, and I got corrected for that. And when in the nuclear world, you have a corrective record, a CR that you file. Anything you see, a drop of water on the floor, anything you see. And so that was a CR. So I realized at that point, like, hey, everything is about structure. There is a plan to everything. There's a reason for everything. And and two, it was a great like training ground. So they put you through an education system. So if you kind of think about, for me, nuclear power meant one, you're learning what things really are, and you're learning two, how to communicate, right? So
mm,
so as an engineer in a nuclear power plant, you're the one responsible for signing off on that weld that welder is about to go
mm,
do. Well, I'm a 22 something know nothing kid signing off and approving things that a 30-year veteran who's been welding for his whole life is supposed to be doing. There I quickly realized, like, you got to know how to talk to people throughout the entire organization. Your top boss, so we would present to top bosses corrective actions, all the way down to the people doing the really work, the hard work. And so it was, as you build businesses, I think it's important to realize that that golden thread from the top to the bottom goes through each person in the organization. And I was a piece of that Dixie chain, if you want to call it that. And so
mm.
it was an interesting experience. I I realized I didn't want to do that my whole life. A lot of people wanted to go in that career path their whole life. And I was like, there's got to be something more here. It's got to be something more. And so, um, yeah, that was for me a little bit but the lessons I would say from nuclear power are, communication and a lot of the things, a lot of people came from, you know, Army, Navy, the different Marines, the different armed services, all the different, because there's that same rigor, structure, formality that you can put into it. So it's all about process, right? Process of building things and doing things. And I think that's was a great lesson early in my career.
I love that what you just touched on there about communication. I know throughout my career, I always stress to people about, I call it organizational influence, being able to speak to people across the organization, regardless of level. And that's the way to get things done. And when you mention process there, it's funny. My wife has recently started a new job. And one of the things I mentioned to her was I said the term SOP. She's like, what? I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, standard operating procedures. I'm like, you
Yeah.
need to get on that. Like, if you don't have them, get them going. But no, that's really interesting that that's what you took from that. I think it's fantastic. Andy, looking at some of your online, your social media, things like that, there was something that really jumped out at me. I love this terminology. You talk about the blacksmith on the corner as a philosophy. What does that mean in practice when you're dealing with deciding which ventures you're going to take on?
Yeah, so that the term blacksmith is kind of interesting for me and it resonates a lot. So I went from a nuclear power plant, which was a very safe and stable job, right? Parents are proud, family's proud, you've made it, you're at the power company, right? To working with a Belgium company that, you're doing what? You're gonna move to Atlanta and take a job with a foreign company? Like, what are you doing? Right? That was a risk level. When I 2007 started my first venture with a wife, a kid on the way, and the way I put my money into the business to start was a home equity line of credit
Mm.
with $26,000 in. You're kind of at a place where you're sort of the bonehead now in the family, right? Like you're the dude who just risked it all to go in on this venture. And we when we started that business, everything that could have imagined, everything that we had dreamed would happen, didn't happen. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong.
Mm.
So we learned in that, like, okay, you got to have a level of grit, perseverance, and you better stay pretty positive throughout this whole thing because it's a bumpy ride. We started to get a little traction. We got our first customer, and the way we had to manufacture this big oil filled burner, right? Well, we needed someone to manufacture that, and the people that we were finding were, first generation, essentially business owners slash entrepreneurs who had created a fabrication facility, and we would go to them and say, "Hey, here's our drawings. Can you make this thing?" And we had multiple of those, and they were usually the cornerstone of the small town. Sometimes at the four-way stop. And my business partner would say, blacksmith on the corner because and I was like, man, you're so right because they're taking risk. They're turning raw materials into something useful. Blacksmiths did that. They're creators, right? They're taking something and creating something, and they're business owners. They're entrepreneurs, and they didn't have all these, dreams and visions of the unicorn or the hockey stick curve, or they were just providing for their family, providing for their community, providing for their employees, and I loved it because when we started that business, the thing was if you get to year 5 in your business, you have made it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, cool. Years 1 and 2 sucked real bad, and we were looking for jobs and trying to figure it out. Year 3 and 4 and 5 were like tremendous scale, and we had to figure that out. That's a new challenge and not easier by any stretch, right? But we got to year 5, and we threw a company-wide employee party. So we had all our employees come. We invited all the families to come, and one of our welders' spouse came up to me and said, "Andy, man, I just want to say thank you because you've changed our entire life for our family." And I didn't know the impact entrepreneurship could have on people until she said that. Because what I realized is that if you can provide a good place to work through entrepreneurship and that employee has a wonderful time and experience, even though it's hard, still has a wonderful time, and they go home and they can pour that same sort of joy back into their family, their kids, they then go do that to someone else. Now we've created infinite impact, right? And that blacksmith concept is just for me a reminder that everyone is out doing this for someone else, not always themselves, right? Because we can get caught up with the whole Silicon Valley thing of like tech and AI and we're changing the world, we're building unicorns. As long as we're doing that for the right reasons. And I
Hmm.
think that's for me, that's the blacksmith reminder is like always remember where your roots are and remember who you're serving.
Man, love that. I love that. I love the whole infinite impact, man. I think that is just so it resonates so much with me. And I think again, that's why when I start to see some of the things you're doing, it's why I definitely had a kind of a connection. I'm like, yeah, this is good energy that this guy brings. So Andy, in saying all that, right? When it comes to that, I'll say it this way: when there's you got people, purpose, process. Which of those is most? What do you see is missing most when a company is struggling, and how do you fix it?
Yeah. So shout out to my boy Russ Howard who gave me that, and I've used it ever since because I think it's awesome. So to be honest, I think a lot of times it's the process piece, and that's why I like kind of where we're building today is that we get we can start with the purpose, right? Sometimes the problem though is we don't let the whole organization know that purpose. So I think the key with the purpose is to make sure we're clearly aligned, and I think the great leaders that I'm around, they know how to align that golden thread, if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
pretty routinely, right? Whether that's as simple as like a Friday, what's happening at XYZ company, email to all the people, like just little things matter. So I think the purpose piece is one that's probably we can be the cheerleaders around, right? The people side, that's one where it's a matter of you got to get the hiring and firing right, you know? And
Hmm.
I've learned through just being a part of other great organizations who are hiring great people, there's amazing people for every role. And, there's a lot of people looking for jobs right now. Well, there's the right job for you. And so just not getting a job sometimes is as good as getting a job. And so the people side, and I've made every mistake with the people side. Like our first employee was a kid out of college who was willing to work part time as an engineer for us. I was like, heck yeah, man, he's willing to work part time. That means less money.
Hmm.
To hiring people from competitors. And what I realized with competitors is sometimes they bring the same junk that the competitors bringing into your organization. I've hired family. I've hired people who I thought could help, right? All these things. And so with the people side, I would say just get really great at vetting people. And I'll say something interesting. I had an interview for a venture capital firm up in New York City one time, and it was a operating partner role, which basically means you don't get paid. You just work to help new ideas come around.
Hmm.
And the one of the things was like, Andy, show me your iPhone, front of your iPhone, and it was to see like how cluttered is your life? How, when I sat down at the table for lunch,
Hmm.
when I unraveled my napkin, they looked to see how I placed my fork and my phone on the table. And they only hired people who would take the phone and do it perpendicular to the lines of the table because it meant process and structure for this particular role, right? And there's all kinds. But so the people side, I would say get really clear on talent and hiring the best and attracting the best. I think that's something that like social media can do positively for you is
Hmm.
let people in your influence. The process piece, that's a tough one because when we were going to scale from 2 million to 12 million in one year, I was scared to death because I thought we're going to kill this thing. Like this train's moving so fast on the tracks and we're barely staying on. And that was because of the process side. Nowadays, we're fortunate that the tools of today allow us to like accelerate that quickly, but being a piece of that process side, I think so. I think if I had to say where I see most businesses struggle, it's that for sure.
Yeah, you said one thing I'll take away from what you just said, and I never thought of it this way, but you said about make sure you get the hiring and firing right. I don't know if that's thought about as much, right? I think both has mattered. And the other thing was sometimes a job you don't get is just as important. And really quick story, when I was younger, I had a job up here in Philadelphia to get a job at the US Mint.
Okay. Wow.
Had to have a blood test done. Nobody told me. I'm literally out 17 years old. I'm going to get this job. I had a friend, I had a connection. Nobody told me I shouldn't eat a bowl of Fruit Loops before the blood test. So they thought I was a diabetic.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't get the job. a month later, I get into the career that I am still in now, 30 plus years.
Right?
So it's crazy, man. But yeah, as soon as you said that, I'm like, man, he's so right.
It's
Um,
true. Love it.
so obviously not everything's been easy for you, right? So what's a moment where you had to, it was tough and you really had to push and get through it?
We had a company fail one time, and it was one thing I realized in that venture was I got out of my swim lane a little bit into a business that I didn't understand and maybe overestimated, and all market conditions, macro things went wrong, didn't go in our favor, and there's a moment, and I see this today with other businesses too, where there's a moment where optimism sometimes can hurt you, right? And so you believe in this thing, you know you can turn it around. You've done it before, right? You've maybe got a little on the pride versus humility side. And you make decisions by you just wait too long, for example, to make it to try to start shaving cost. You wait too long to make the hard decision. You wait too long to do the thing. And and I've been there where it's like you wait too long and you start to see you let optimism take over and you let sort of pride take over, and then you wake up one day and you got it, you're standing at the wall where you have to make hard decisions,
Mm.
and that impacts a lot of people. And so I think I think going into things where you're leading with humility, I think that's huge. I think leading with getting the right people around you is huge. But I would also say don't allow other people to put their limits onto you. A lot of people have experiences and a lot of people have ways of doing things, but a lot of people haven't been in your shoes necessarily. So, be bold and brave enough to trust your gut sometimes and not allow other people to put their limits onto you. So that's key. But yeah, man, I, now I just say lead with humility, and I've realized too you can't control a whole lot of stuff. You can control what you do every day, but there's bigger things moving and happening out there, and so staying humble in the moment, focusing on what you can focus on today to get where you want to be in a year or two is kind of how I stay grounded a little bit.
Man, that's awesome. As you're saying that, I'm sitting here going, man, now, being 53 now, I'm like, man, I wish I would have thought like that when I was in my 20s. Obviously, I think we all do. And it's funny because we hear back then how as we get older we'll understand. And back then I'm always like, I understand now, you don't understand, but now I get it. You mentioned another phrase in that though that I enjoy even throughout my career, swim lane. I'm always thinking about that when we try to do a Kaizen and things like that, right?
Oh yeah.
But it brings me to this though, because a great point. You mentioned swim lanes, but I've seen your success, which I was extremely impressed with, how you were able to kind of build businesses across different industries. Um, how do you make that happen? And what are those risks? Is there anything now that you look at and you go, there's one thing that you go, I really have to pay attention to this if I'm going to be jumping across industries?
Yeah, so totally. So I think it's getting really clear on what your superpower is
Mm,
and your contribution to the business. Because what I what I learned in the first business maybe didn't serve me well throughout, but I you had to do everything, right? You had to wear all the hats, you had to do all the stuff, and you were doing it to make bread and butter on the table, basically, right? But you had to do everything, and so I got accustomed to doing everything. And then once you start scaling and you get a little bit bigger, you get accustomed to doing nothing because
mm,
you're just complacent, right? So you got those two sides of doing everything and being complacent and doing nothing. And and then and so I've acquired a few businesses, exited a few, and through that process, you start to learn and get honed in on like, whoa, I failed miserably there because I got out of my swim lane, which is basically superpower, and was trying to do things that I'm not really meant to be doing. And oh, by the way, there's a world full of people who have complementary superpowers who are awesome. And so the one thing, like I will never choose to build a business alone again, ever, because I know what I need, where I've been successful, what that looks like, and who I need to surround myself with. And when that happens, it's like I'm having the time of my life, whether we're getting customer number one or customer number 1,000, because now I know that, okay, if I'm going to build this bigger piece of the puzzle, I'm just one puzzle piece. I'm not the
Mhm.
whole puzzle. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes I messed up thinking I was the whole puzzle, not realizing that I'm just a component of the puzzle. And if I just do this thing really, really well, this can all be successful as long as I get the next person who does their thing really, really well, and making sure we all sort of stay together as a partner, right? Versus maybe like hierarchical thing. And
Mhm.
so I think learning that, right? That what is my superpower? And it's not easy to find, by the way. I probably spent 4 years looking like a freaking dog chasing this tail around trying to figure it out, right? Because it's not easy to know what you're good at and what you're bad at, or what you love and what you don't love when your experiences tell you something different,
Mhm.
potentially, right? And so, yeah, man, I have realized that my one thing is to partner with the great people who complement what I'm trying to build and where I want to go. And I've learned to trust my gut too, because like
Mhm.
you get the naysayers, right? Who are like, oh, you're a squirrel, you're all over the place, you're confused, you're distracted, you're whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm not, because I'm in my superpower and I've got people around. So, and I think too, it's the fun part there is you can go industry agnostic because you know what you're good at, and for example, this is a fun one. Like I play a role at a bigger company in New York, and I play one particular role, which is to due diligence ideas and support the founder. That's it. They're making such big moves because they know they've got the right superpower ecosystem around
Mhm.
them that they only have to do the one thing. If each of us do our one thing really well, collectively we come together. Which in fact is like you could probably relate to a sports team, same thing.
Mhm.
But entrepreneurship's tricky, right? Because like you can have a solopreneur and you can have all these things, but I've just realized that doing it alone for me is not the jam. Learning my superpower, getting those around me who have their superpower is the jam.
Man, I can't even convey to you some of the terminology you're using though, because I swear to you, between yesterday and today, agnostic was in my conversation, ecosystem was in my conversation. Like, no, I totally get it, man. And I think it's two things that I've learned. It's being able to surrender purposefully so that you're able to discover the superpower. And then once you discover that superpower, it's understanding that that superpower isn't all encompassing. And I think once you have that, and it sounds like you do, I think you're in a great spot. Um, Interesting question here, I think. Have you ever experienced where sometimes some of the rules of old school business have clashed with new tech, or where they've actually blended together perfectly?
It's a great question. So, what I see most right now is, and this is my thesis for what we're building, is that you got a bunch of old school industries and businesses, and then you've got these new school tools, tech, AI, automation.
Mm,
And we can we can get caught up in the trap that we've always done it this way, it works. And I would call that complacency, right? And a lack of change mindset. Because what's happening now, we're seeing I just think we're going through something where technology is changing so rapidly.
mhm,
Our ability to test, try, play with those technologies and then apply those to our businesses is like never before.
mhm,
And so I'm really curious about building that bridge between the two because if tech is ultimately bad and evil, cool. At least let's use what's good in it, right? If it takes us where we're going to go there anyway.
mhm,
If it's great and it helps the world, great. Let's start now. And so I think it was funny in that Belgium job I traveled with a cross-functional boss to a city, and he wrote back to and I saw it on my current boss's email. He said, Andy's biggest strength is he's open-minded. I was like, what does that mean? Open-minded. And I think that's what we as old school legacy business owners need to at least embrace is that open-minded mentality to what's happening and changing in the world
mhm,
and be open to those new ways. And so, I mean, we've got a great client right now who is basically legacy industry, old school owner who said, "Look, we need to embrace technology or we're going to die. That's our secret thing." And so that's the perfect one of open-mindedness with the ability to come in and put tech in. And then I just think the gap is only getting bigger of knowledge and opportunity to
Mhm.
be able to help. And so I think truly it starts with that open-mindedness and that willing to embrace change to avoid complacency.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because I think what you just said there, though, I would categorize those traits. I think that you can say that's old school traits, right? That's always been a way business can grow and succeed. Now it's just evolving more with some of the new technology. I listen, I think we're on the verge of really, really exciting times. And I mean, obviously when I see some of the things you're doing now, it's at the forefront of it. And it gets me excited to kind of sit back and watch and take part and see all the great things that are happening. And I tell the people on my team all the time this. I say, don't be afraid of technology, embrace it and learn how to make it work for you, right? I think if we can do that, we're better off. Um, so speaking of new technology, I think a lot of companies are throwing around it's, the buzzword AI modernization. It's a big buzzword. What what does it look like to you though when it works? But on the flip side, and I think you kind of said it, is we're expanding so rapidly. What's it look like when it falls flat?
Yeah. So when it works, and I'll say too, like just to where do you start in that whole equation? Find a friction point. That's the
Mm,
starting point, right? Find a friction point, or a heavily manual process. So when it works well, for example, we've got a business that what in the mining industry, a truck drives in, and
mm,
the scale house operator has to determine how much weight can that truck leave with,
mm,
right? And so that truck has a number of axles and it has a distance between the axles. So the scale house operator walks out, measures the distance of the axle with a tape measure, counts the number of wheels, and goes on a piece of paper and says, 5 axles, 47 feet, you can leave with 88,000 pounds. So they load them up to
mm,
88,000 pounds. We took a camera, positioned it to look at the truck as it drove in, measured the wheels, used machine learning to determine what is a wheel. And so now within 2 seconds, essentially,
mm,
that truck can come in and be measured. And while that truck's being measured, we're pulling permits out of the database that the truck scans with a QR code.
mm,
So machine learning, a component of AI, trained to look at what a wheel is, specifically that middle part of the wheel, digitally measure with a camera. That's a success story where now trucks are leaving properly weighed because humans couldn't keep up with the amount of
mm,
measuring that needed to happen. Life changing. So now on the other side, there's firms who will say, hey, let's go try to implement AI into our business. And they start grabbing tools off the shelf
mhm,
and implementation fails. So the cases where we've seen where it's gone kind of south and haywire and where people are like, I hate AI, I'm never putting it in my business again, is when implementation went
mm,
bad. And I think that's a lot of times just sort of throwing solutions at different places and not taking a look at your business saying, okay, where do we want to start? What's phase one? You hit phase one, what's phase two? And what do these phases keep looking like? And how do we continue to reiterate those as we go through? And so it's an interesting time, man. I mean, that's what we're looking at when we see companies. It's like what is available today that you could pull off the shelf and implement properly, and what needs to be developed. And I think good news, we got both of those capabilities now, all of us do, to be able to say, if we can dream it, pretty sure we can make it happen.
mm. Definitely. Definitely. So leads me to one of your current ventures when it comes to mindful me. You're combining AI with mental wellness. Like what sparked that idea and where do you see tech making the biggest difference in mental health?
Yeah, so Mindful Me Care is an interesting one. So about 8 months ago, well, 3 or 4 years ago, that case example where the truck and the machine learning and all that happened, I realized, hey, we're using this thing called AI machine learning to do some stuff in businesses. Could we do that in other businesses? So that birthed Unisupports, which is essentially our venture studio technology growth firm, which helps businesses implement this AI. But I realized to found Unisupports, I can't do this. I don't know how to program anything. I don't even know what AI really is, if you know. And so I was like, I got to go find the right partner to be associated with this, right? Interviewed many, many people. Out of the blue, someone makes an appointment on my calendar who was the perfect human being for this.
Mm,
So we meet, we do all the normal early stage startup stuff. We ended up getting some customers and we grow a business called Unisports. Well, he had a passion project for helping others with mental illness. He had seen it in his community, seen it in his region, and people in his community. If you were on some sort of mental health spectrum, or if you just weren't normal, then you were different. And if you're different, you get ostracized out of the community. And he's able to build technology solutions. And so we teamed up and launched that out of Unisupports actually to make an impact in that community on a worldwide basis, because what it essentially is, so mindfulme.care is a platform where 24/7 you can go on and you can not chat GPT talk to somebody, but talk to a model that's been trained with worldwide mental health data, backed by doctors and experts who can then help you migrate through whatever you're going through. And then you're like, hey, now it's time to really talk to somebody. There's a way to talk to somebody virtually. And then, hey, I need to speak to somebody locally. Then we got that facilitated. And then if it's a matter of, I'm in an emergency and need help right now, but I can't say that, there's a mechanism for that. So it's a platform to, having a companion, whether that's a real doctor or just a database essentially, or courses that'll help you get through. So we're talking to different organizations, the sheriffs, military forms, where it's like, how can we help you deal with things that are people just aren't talking about every day, or they don't have someone to talk to every day. And so it's a neat one, man. I love that 0 to 1 game, the entrepreneurship game. This one, it has a big why around it,
Mm.
and the technology is there nowadays that we can do something like this. So super cool. I give Rice all the credit. He's a business partner. He conceived this. And then we did all the fun things I talked about before, which was like get the right people on the bus
Mm-hmm.
to then launch and grow. So we'll see where it goes, but it's fun and exciting.
Yeah, man. I kudos to you guys for that, man, because I think, especially with my platform here, obviously mental health has been a big topic over the last 4 years of me doing this. And when I see from when I started doing this podcast to where now speaking to guys like you about where we are, it's really making a big, I think that suffering in silence, it's still there, but I think we're making waves to improve that. And people aren't as stigmatized, I'll say, to want to speak about it. And I think that's a credit to everybody who's doing a lot of great work in this area. And Andy, I'll be honest, I've seen a few studies too when it comes to AI, not specifically around mental health, but in the primary care space, where I see that AI is diagnosing at actually 98% correct rate, where it's only losing out sometimes to some of the highest, like, most talented brain surgeons in the world. Like it's pretty incredible where we're going. So earlier in our conversation, I want to touch on this again. You mentioned infinite impact. Want to kind of challenge you a little bit here to kind of really hone in on that. What's that really mean to you personally and professionally?
Yeah, great answer, great question. So I I was part of a small Bible group, right? Years and years ago. I asked the guy leading it, I said, hey, how do we change the world? How like how do we change the world? And he said, one person at a time.
Hmm.
And I was like, no way, dude. That's too wimpy. Like that's a limited answer. You're just putting your limits out, right? Whatever. And I completely disagreed with him. And then and this would have been like 2007 or 8. So early days of entrepreneurial company number one, struggle bus time, trying to make it, all that stuff. And I just challenged that for several years. And then when I realized that employee told me that the party, I realized, hey, there's something there, right? Then when we had our first exit, I realized, hey, there's a world that exists above the clouds that people in my community they never saw, right? Like they didn't know you could build something and break out of the burdens of having to have a job, or having to live paycheck to paycheck, or having to not do something because you couldn't afford it or didn't budget for it, right? There's a world that exists that I never saw. And then when I saw it, I was like, how do we bring everyone else up here with us? Right? And I've learned through that you can, like, how do I change the world now? My answer is by how I make that very person next to me feel. So that's one on one. And then two, through entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is my answer of how do I scale and change the world at scale? How do I change the world at scale? And and my thought about this infinite impact is like small town communities can sometimes get a little ancestral and
Mm.
all this stuff, right? A little negative. Well, that impacts everyone. 1 ounce of one ripple in a pond can go a long way. And so I'm kind of doubling down on that one person at a time thing now and sort of changing my tone on that. And the infinite impact thing, I think I thought around it like 2020, the world's going crazy, nobody knows what to do. We had just sold a business because it would have died if we didn't sell it.
Mm.
And it was like, what do we do now? And all I know to do is like just talk positive message. And it's like, how do we just put more ripples out in the world to create an infinite impact? And yeah, so it's a little cutesy term, but I do think that's what it's about is how do we get everyone else lifted up to be their best potential person, one person at a time.
Yeah, and I think what I heard there that I know I'll think about after this podcast is done is what you mentioned about taking people to see that world up in the clouds or above the clouds that they never knew existed. Listen, I'll say this to you bluntly right now, even for me, man. As you said that, I'm like, you know what, he's right. Like, I don't even know if I think in that way myself, and it's something that I'm like, you know what, that's something to really consider. So, no, that's good stuff on you, man. Dude, I love your positivity, man. I love it. It's freaking fantastic, man. I got
Thank you.
two left here. I
Love it.
definitely want to ask you this. What separates a boss from a true leader? And then how do you make founders make that leap?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So a boss versus a leader. Yeah. So the leader is somebody who, when you turn around and walk into the woods and you're, 40 feet into the forest, you look back and is anybody behind you, or are you there alone looking around like you've done outrun everyone, right? Um, I think leadership goes a little bit around that purpose component. So making sure that one, as a leader, we see the vision and we understand the vision. And I would argue we even cast the vision, right? And then two, that's forward looking. When I turn back and look at the organization, the people that I need to be around to get this vision done, because I can't do it alone, they are aligned and understand their particular role and how they play in that vision. So if it's a puzzle, each piece of the puzzle understands what their shape is and what their function and performance is. And they know what that success looks like. In the boss world, this is where it gets a little weird. You get the people who will say, I don't know. Boss a little bit is a bad word for me. I just don't know how to articulate it. But the leadership thing is something where you get people around a big vision. The boss thing is you're basically on top of somebody trying to get somebody else to execute, and you're a little bit playing house.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, it's we're either leading or we're dying. Like it's just yes.
Mm.
Those are two very polarizing different things, and you can be a great boss and a great leader, but then you're really a leader. And you can be a leader even if you are the lowest ranking employee on the in the organization. You can be a leader, and
Mm.
so we all have that chance.
Yeah, well, I love that phrase. Either you're leading or you're dying. I think it's true, and that's I think early on in my career I was probably chasing that manager boss role more,
Me too,
but
man.
really fortunate for me, great mentors learned early on, kind of what you just said. So I'm thankful and always will be thankful for that. Um, all right, last thing I want to ask you here is when you think about faith, family, fitness, and freedom, not as just words, but as the compass for your life, what do you hope people will remember about you and the way that you live those words?
Yeah, I think how you make other people feel, right? So faith doesn't realize that was something that was very very instrumental in my early first venture, and something that I have weaved and bobbed in and out of through the journey. And it's get either you get humble yourself or you get humbled, and getting humbled makes me realize that faith piece. The family thing, that's just part of who I am. I love the journey of building businesses and building a family, and I don't think they're two separate things. I think it's one thing. I think it's life. Fitness for me is just how I think, and I have to do that every day. Just or otherwise, I couldn't do this crazy job of entrepreneurship.
Mm.
And the freedom thing is being able to do whether that's whatever you think is the right thing to do. But those four words, kind of we all go through this phase of like, who am I? What do I do? What's my superpower? All that stuff. what do I do next in our careers? And that kind of hit me as like the pillars of my career, and then, or the pillars of me. And then from there, it's like, what do I hope people think about? It's like, how do I make them feel through that? Right. If there's a connection and, if it's a little bit of encouragement in one of those four things, great. So that's kind of that's what I hope people take away from it.
Well, I think you're doing everything you can to make people feel a certain way, my friend.
Well, thank
And kudos to you for that, man. And if you haven't yet, you should make a t-shirt that says Pillars of Me. What a great
you.
thing.
That's a good one.
Love
I
it.
like that.
Love that, man. Pillars of Me. That's
I
fantastic.
love it.
Where can people I'll put show notes, but where can people find you, Andy, and connect with
Yeah.
you?
So Andy Smith Life, and you can look on all platforms. So I like to put out content. It's a little bit of a creative endeavor for me, and so I enjoy it. And so it's on the YouTube and the LinkedIn, and I've kind of found LinkedIn to be, for me, the home the longest. And so I really, um, I'm gonna tell you what, with the content thing and where to find people, it's like you never know who you're touching when you tell your story and when you talk about things, and it can be whatever you want. Like everyone will tell you to do things a certain way. It can be whatever you want. But like for me, content has led to connections like we're here today, which has led to, conversations like we are, and then opportunity. And so I think there's a neat sort of pillar around all of it. So yeah, Andy Smith Life. That was a long-winded answer to say I love people. I love putting ourselves out there because it does create hopefully impact and lets the right people come in and the wrong people go out.
Yeah, man. No, and I think what you said there about we never know who we're touching, man. I think there's a lot of times we probably put stuff out into the universe and we never even know, or we'll never know if it impacted anybody or not. And I won't lie, every now and then I'll get something from like months ago that I'll hear somebody, oh, I saw your post or this from like, I'm like, I forget about that, right? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad it resonated, you know? So
Oh,
no,
wow. Yes.
that's really good stuff, man. Good stuff on you. But
Well, thank you.
listen, man, this has been a pleasure. I cannot wait to speak to you, man. I've been excited for it. I think that anybody who sits here and listens to this is going to take a lot out of it. And I hope that they look to follow you if they're not. And really, I think you're a positive impact on a lot of people, Andy. So I hope
Thank
people
you.
will see that also. So everyone, as usual, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the podcast. Thanks again. And Andy, thank you. Wish you
Well, you're a
nothing
rock
but the best,
star.
my friend.
Thank you, Friday. You're a rock star. I appreciate everything.
Everyone, take care. Bye.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening, and remember, never hibernate on your goals.